Darrell Abbott's hands were shaking as he gripped his Dean ML guitar outside Metal Blade Records in Los Angeles. June 14, 1989. The 22-year-old Texan had been sitting in this rented van for 38 minutes, watching industry people flow through those glass doors, trying to build courage to face the man who could change everything for Pantera. Brian Slagel was inside. The Brian Slagel, founder of Metal Blade Records, the label that launched Metallica and Slayer while Pantera ground away in Texas dive bars. This was Darrell's shot, his brother Vinny's shot, their escape from a regional circuit where they'd been stuck for nearly a decade. But Darrell was terrified, not of performing. He'd done that thousands of times since age 14. He was terrified of what Brian Slagel represented. Validation from an industry that had ignored Pantera's glam metal albums. Validation that a Texas kid called Diamond Darrell could make it in 1989's thrash-dominated metal scene. If you want to discover the shocking truth about what happened in that meeting and how it changed metal history forever, make sure to subscribe to our channel. We dig deep into the untold stories of music's greatest legends, and you won't want to miss what comes next. Darrell looked at his Dean ML, the lightning bolt guitar he'd modified countless times. He'd swapped pickups 3 times, rewired electronics, adjusted the bridge for perfect tuning even during whammy bar destruction. Professional metal guitarists in 1989 had Jackson soloists and ESP customs. Darrell had a Dean bought with guitar contest winnings and modified in his Arlington garage. Vinny was supposed to be here, but he'd stayed at the hotel dealing with bassist Rex, who'd gotten into a fight. So Darrell was alone, which made everything worse. Vinny was the confident one who could walk into any label and demand respect. Darrell was the quiet one off stage, letting his playing do the talking. But what if his playing wasn't enough? What if Brian Slagel saw Pantera's glam past and laughed them out of Los Angeles? Darrell forced himself from the van at 2:47 p.m. wearing his usual stage outfit, camouflage shorts and sleeveless shirt, even for this business meeting. It was all he had that felt authentic. He grabbed his guitar case and a demo tape representing everything Pantera had worked toward this past year. The tape was different from anything they'd released before. Heavier, darker, more aggressive. The sound Darrell heard in his head when he thought about 1989 metal, not the glam material on their independent albums. Inside Metal Blade's offices, walls displayed album covers and tour posters. Slayer's South of Heaven, Metallica's Master of Puppets. Bands that had changed metal, made it heavier and faster. And here was Darrell Abbott from Arlington, Texas, trying to convince Brian Slagel that Pantera belonged on the same label. When Brian appeared, Darrell stood so fast he almost dropped his guitar case. Brian was younger than expected, early 30s, with casual confidence of someone who'd built a metal empire. Jeans and a Slayer tour shirt, looking more fan than executive. They entered an office of controlled chaos, demo tapes everywhere, magazines piled on surfaces, a turntable in the corner. Brian gestured to a chair. "So you're Diamond Darrell. Guitar contests, right? Used to win them all over Texas." "Yes, sir," Darrell said, Texas accent strong. "Been playing since 12, winning contests since 14. They banned me from some because I kept winning." Brian nodded neutrally. "And you've got 4 albums out. Metal Magic, Projects in the Jungle, I Am the Night, Power Metal. Those albums were Pantera's past. Their glam phase that felt embarrassing as thrash metal dominated. Yeah, we put those out ourselves. But we've been changing our sound, getting heavier." "I listened to them," Brian said. "They're very 1984. Glam influence, hair metal choruses, Sunset Strip stuff. That's not what Metal Blade is about." We're thrash, death metal, extreme. Darrell pulled a demo tape from his jacket. This is new material, completely different. Heavier, with a groove that's not thrash but not glam. We're calling it groove metal. Brian looked skeptical at the tape labeled Cowboys from Hell. Groove metal. That's not really a thing. Brian leaned back. Look, Darrell, I'm going to be straight. The bands that make it know who they are from day one. Metallica knew they were thrash. Slayer knew they were extreme. You have 4 glam albums. Now you say you've reinvented yourselves. That's a hard sell. Darrell felt his throat tighten. We were kids when we made those albums. I was 16 on Metal Magic. We didn't know who we were. But now we do. This is who Pantera really is. Brian was silent, staring at the demo. Here's the thing. Even if this new sound is great, you've got a credibility problem. The metal community knows you as Diamond Darrell and the glam guys from Texas. How do you overcome that? Every word was true. We'll prove it on stage, Darrell said quietly. We'll work harder than any band you've signed. Brian shook his head. I've got 20 bands already working that hard, with the right reputation, without a glam past to overcome. Why take a chance on you when Cannibal Corpse and Atheist and Gwar are fighting for tour support? Your guitar playing, it's flashy but not heavy. Van Halen-influenced rock guitar, not metal guitar. The vocals are too melodic. Everything says you're trying to be Motley Crue, not Slayer. I'll be honest, Brian said. I'm not going to sign you. Your past is too much baggage. Your new sound isn't what the market wants. Thrash is king. Death metal is growing. There's no room for groove metal. My advice is stick with independent releases, build your Texas following. Maybe in a few years there'll be an opening. But today, you're not right for Metal Blade. Darrell felt tears burning but refused to cry in front of Brian Slagel. Thank you for your time, sir. He grabbed his guitar case and walked out, past Gold Records, past the receptionist, into Los Angeles heat. He made it to the van before tears started. Brian Slagel had told him Pantera's past was too much baggage. Groove metal wasn't real. Stick to Texas and try in a few years. Everything Darrell believed about Pantera's direction, dismissed in 15 minutes. Darrell cried in that parking lot over an hour. He watched other musicians come and go, probably getting deals while Pantera got rejected. He thought about guitar contests won, nights in Dallas and Houston dive bars, years believing hard work and talent would be enough. Then something shifted. Darrell looked in the rear-view mirror. He saw his father, Jerry, who taught him guitar at 12. His mother, who drove him to every contest when money was tight. Vinny, who believed when nobody else did. And Darrell got angry. Brian said groove metal wasn't real. Well, Darrell would make it real. Brian said Pantera's past was baggage. Well, Darrell would make music so heavy nobody would care about the past. Brian said stick to Texas. Well, Darrell would build something so powerful the entire metal world would have to pay attention. Darrell drove back to the hotel and found Vinny. How'd it go? Brian's criticism poured out. The glam past. Groove metal dismissal. Stick to Texas advice. Vinny's expression darkened with each word. Then he stood, hand on Darrell's shoulder. Brian Slagel doesn't know what he's talking about. We're not waiting. We're making Cowboys from Hell so heavy, so undeniable that every label will beg to sign us, and Brian Slagel will kick himself for passing. That night, they wrote down every Brian Slagel criticism. The glam past, lack of heaviness, flashy solos, melodic vocals, polished production. Next to each, what they'd fix. Pantera became obsessed. Darrell tuned down his guitar, creating heavier, more brutal sound. He developed tighter, more aggressive picking. He wrote riffs that weren't Metallica or Slayer, but something entirely different. Groovy, yet crushing. Phil Anselmo transformed his vocals. Gone were melodic choruses and high screams. In came raw, aggressive roar matching Darrell's riffs. Vinny changed his drumming, adding double bass while keeping groove alive. They practiced hours daily, played shows across Texas, refining songs, building a fanatical following. Kids who'd never cared about Pantera's glam albums couldn't get enough of this heavier sound. Early 1990, nearly a year post-Rejection, Pantera signed with Atco Records, an Atlantic division. Not Metal Blade, but a major label with real distribution and marketing. Cowboys from Hell recorded with producer Terry Date, who understood Pantera's vision. Released July 1990, it hit metal like a nuclear bomb. The opening title track established immediately this wasn't glam Pantera. Darrell's riffs were crushing, tuned down, aggressive, but groovy and memorable. His solos still technical and flashy, but served the songs, adding brutality, not showing off. Phil's vocals were raw and powerful, delivering rebellion lyrics with conviction. The album didn't just succeed, it created a subgenre. Groove metal became real because Pantera made it real. Machine Head, Lamb of God, dozens of others would cite Cowboys from Hell as showing there was middle ground between thrash's speed and traditional metal's accessibility. By 1992's vulgar display of power, Pantera was one of the biggest metal bands worldwide, headlining arenas, getting MTV play, influencing a generation. Darrell Abbott, told to stick to Texas, was being called one of metal's greatest guitarists. Diamond Darrell disappeared, replaced by Dimebag Darrell, reflecting his new persona and love of marijuana and whiskey. Years later, 2001 interview, Brian Slagel was asked about bands he wished he'd signed. Pantera is the obvious one. Dimebag came into my office in 1989 with a Cowboys from Hell demo, and I told him their glam past was too much baggage and groove metal wasn't real. That might have been my biggest career mistake. The interviewer asked if Brian recognized Pantera's potential. I heard something in what Dimebag described. He was passionate about groove metal, but I focused on what Pantera had been, not what they were becoming. I saw 4 glam albums and couldn't see past it. Dimebag discussed the Brian Slagel rejection in several interviews. In 2003, when discussing setbacks, he brought it up. Brian told me our past was too much baggage and groove metal wasn't real. From his 1989 perspective, he was probably right. We did have a glam past. Groove metal wasn't established. But instead of accepting that as final, we took it as motivation. Brian said our past was baggage, so we made music so heavy the past didn't matter. He said groove metal wasn't real, so we made it real. Was Dimebag angry at Brian for rejecting Pantera? Not at all, man. That rejection made us prove what we were capable of. If Brian signed us right then, we might have relied on label support instead of building our movement. Being told we weren't right for Metal Blade forced us to become undeniable. Dimebag carried that rejection as motivation. Every time someone doubted Pantera's transformation, every critic saying we couldn't escape glam roots, I'd remember Brian Slagel's office and that rejection feeling. And I'd play harder, write heavier riffs, prove them wrong with music. Brian Slagel's June 1989 rejection could have ended Pantera's reinvention before it started. Instead, it catalyzed them to create Cowboys from Hell with such intensity it couldn't be ignored. The man who said groove metal wasn't real watched Pantera create and define that entire subgenre. Cowboys from Hell sold over 2 million copies. Vulgar Display of Power went double platinum. Pantera became one of the 90s most influential metal bands, inspiring countless musicians and permanently changing what heavy metal could sound like. The Dean ML guitar Dimebag brought to Brian's office became his signature instrument, modified and customized until it was metal's most recognizable guitar. The lightning bolt body shape became synonymous with Dimebag's playing, aggressive and flashy, but always serving the groove. The tuned-down, heavy but groovy riff style Brian dismissed as unmarketable became the template for a generation of metal bands. Dimebag's technique, combining thrash aggression with blues-influenced bends and squeals, became one of metal's most copied approaches. All because Diamond Darrell refused to accept rejection as the end. All because he took "You're not right for us" as challenge, not verdict. All because he believed in groove metal enough to make it real when industry gatekeepers said it wasn't. Sometimes the best thing for a musician is being told their vision isn't marketable. That's when you discover if you really believe in what you're creating, whether you're chasing trends or building something genuinely new. Dimebag Darrell was told his band's past was too much baggage and his new sound wasn't real. Instead of accepting that limitation, he returned to Texas, spent a year making Cowboys from Hell undeniable, and changed metal music forever. The glam past Brian called baggage, Pantera transformed into proof of evolution. The groove metal sound that wasn't a real thing in 1989 became one of the 90s defining metal subgenres. When Dimebag was tragically killed on stage in 2004, metal lost one of its most innovative and influential guitarists. But his legacy was secure, built on refusing to accept other people's limitations, built on taking rejection and transforming it into revolutionary music. Brian Slagel attended Dimebag's funeral. In a 2005 interview, he reflected on that 1989 meeting. "I think about that conversation a lot, especially after Dimebag's death. I told him to wait a few years, stick to Texas. If he'd listened, if he'd accepted that rejection, metal history would be completely different. Cowboys from Hell might never have happened. Groove metal might not exist." Dimebag proved that sometimes people telling you no just can't see what you're building yet. If this story of rejection turned into revolutionary success inspired you, make sure to subscribe to our channel and share this video. Let us know in the comments if you've ever been told your vision wasn't real and how you responded. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's simply becoming so undeniably great that the genre you created speaks for itself. Dimebag Darrell didn't just prove Brian Slagel wrong. He became a legend, changed metal forever, and proved that groove metal was real by making it impossible to ignore.